After you have completed the planning sequence required in NFPA 472, you will be ready to take action in response to the incident.
Command, Pill from Valley Command will notify the Public Works that we're going to need barricades.
The first place to start is to establish scene control and implement your department's incident management system. This will limit access to the scene and improve the deployment of your resources. In this program, you will learn about establishing scene control, determining control zones, taking protective actions, locating decontamination areas, emergency decontamination techniques, the safety briefing, and the incident management system. One of the best ways to limit additional injuries and to avoid complicating the operation is to establish control zones. This will keep unauthorized personnel out of danger and assist in accounting for your fellow responders. Some general techniques to keep the public away from the response area are to place barrier tape, create roadblocks, and include law enforcement to deny access to the area. Inquiries from the media should be directed to the PIO. However, certain instances can require a more specialized approach. In the case of a facility incident, place team members at common points of entry to deny access. If possible, have a crew member walk a 360 of the building to determine these locations. As they circle the scene, make sure team members stay out of the hazard area or that they don the appropriate PPE. In a transportation incident, block or redirect traffic to limit potential exposures. If possible, coordinate with law enforcement to help share this responsibility. And if an evacuation is required, they can also help you communicate with surrounding residential and business areas. Scene control is extremely important when trying to limit exposures and minimize risks to life safety and the environment. Once your team has established scene control, designate control or work zones. Three types of zones are typically used in a hazmat response. The hot zone is the area immediately surrounding the release that requires the use of PPE to enter. Generally, technician-level hazmat teams are the only personnel allowed to enter this area, as they are trained in advanced monitoring, sampling, and offensive actions. Ops-level personnel with the appropriate PPE and monitoring equipment may enter the hot zone to perform defensive measures if necessary. The size of the hot zone is influenced by the type and extent of spilled or released material. An MSDS or Emergency Response Guidebook will generally suggest a perimeter of 330 feet or 100 meters for unknown materials. However, if a flowing spill or vapor cloud type incident is occurring, the size and scope of the hot zone will have to be greatly increased. Remember, exact determinations are primarily made by technician-level responders with advanced monitoring equipment and computer-aided programs. The warm zone is where decontamination areas are set up. Some type of PPE is required to enter the warm zone. Usually, technician-level hazmat team decontamination and dress-out locations are placed on the upwind or uphill side of the warm zone. This area can also be used as an equipment staging location for technician-level teams. This equipment should also be placed upwind and/or uphill from the leak or spill site. The area furthest away from the release is the cold zone. Command, support, and medical operations are to be placed here. PPE is not required within the cold zone. However, air monitoring will help you determine if the area is safe.
Alrighty guys, want to see that passport?
Each zone should have a responder assigned to its border to make sure only qualified personnel enter the zone according to the IMS. Remember, the size and scope of your control zones will be based on the materials at hand, your team's resources, and how they are deployed. One of the more difficult decisions facing an IC is whether or not to evacuate an area or call for sheltering in place. Clearly, when an explosion or violent rupture is involved, an evacuation is required. The same is also true for areas immediately surrounding a release or adjacent to the hot zone. Other instances may not be so obvious, such as when you're dealing with an unknown commodity in the air. In these cases, the decision-making process should immediately involve several types of technology. Real-time monitoring should be done throughout the incident and will let you know if vapors are a threat to nearby residents. If air monitoring equipment suggests a dangerous vapor cloud is present, some departments use software called Cameo to help determine its shape and directionality. Cameo is plume dispersion modeling software that can help determine the impact of hazardous vapors in specific areas surrounding the incident scene. Cameo includes a chemical library, facility library, and an electronic mapping program. Cameo also factors in wind direction, wind speed, and other physical and environmental factors to create a simulated footprint of the vapor cloud superimposed over a map of the area. Your team will be able to determine what areas will be impacted and the size and scope of the problem. If you are dealing with a known commodity that will not result in negative health effects, you may advise the public to stay where they are, also known as sheltering in place. Should you call for the public to shelter in place, you need to advise them to take several safety measures. Advise them to immediately go inside their homes. Close and lock all windows and doors. Turn off all heating and cooling systems. Put wet towels at the bases of doors leading outside. And listen to the radio or television for further instructions. If residents within the sheltering area are in their cars, direct them to leave the scene with their vents and windows closed. In situations when materials at hand have low to moderate toxicity that is not potentially explosive, sheltering in place is by far the best option. If an evacuation is called for, direct traffic to your predetermined escape routes. Communicating with the public can be a major challenge. Coordinating with law enforcement and local emergency management agencies will help inform residents what actions they need to take and for how long. Continual communication is essential so fears can be alleviated and a high degree of safety can be maintained. Choosing decontamination areas should be done in conjunction with a hazmat specialist and technician-level team members. Typically, decontamination areas are within the warm zone, upwind from the location of the release. Mass decontamination can occur outside of the warm zone in a spot that is convenient for medical teams to deal with a large number of victims. For any type of decontamination, make sure that the area is appropriate for equipment and will not cause problems with runoff. Also, make sure the spot is accessible to medical teams who may need to transport victims out of the area. Should a patient be in a life-threatening situation, emergency decontamination may be required. One of the most common and simple forms of emergency decon is to have the victim remove their clothing and use a hose line to douse the subject. Other chemicals may require water and soap to decontaminate the victim. Some chemicals may only need the patient to be exposed to fresh air to eliminate immediate hazards. But for the most part, using a hose line is standard practice.
Good, that's good, that's good. Let's get you out of here, get you on the floor.
Should you use water to help a subject, the degree of threat to life safety will shape your decision whether or not to recover any runoff. If you do not have time to control the runoff, try to decon away from storm drains and waterways. If you do have time for containment, use a portable swimming pool, tarp, or plastic spread between two ladders to catch the contaminated water. When you are hosing down the subject, keep water spraying on them for a minimum of 20 minutes. Certain corrosives may take even longer to be removed from a victim's skin. The Hazardous Materials Response Book for your jurisdiction will also define the guidelines for your emergency decontamination procedures. NFPA 472 at the operations level requires that you be aware of the components of a safety briefing as a part of your response.
Ready, entry ready, backups ready, everybody's ready. Okay, Spud, let's go.
Okay. Apparently, it was witnessed that they had two people go into the compressor room. One person fled, headed towards the school.
The safety officer and incident commander will inform operations level responders of their responsibilities and, more importantly, their limitations. Known hazards and best practices will be included in the briefing, as well as details about the incident at hand. If terrorism or crime is involved, responders could also be updated as to the involvement of other agencies and what the objectives are to preserve evidence.
Communicate what you see. We'd like you to take pictures if you can. If you got a viable patient, of course.
Although the temptation to immediately get involved in the response is strong, attending a safety briefing will undoubtedly decrease risk to responders and subjects.
Maintain visual contact and contact with the command.
When you respond to a hazmat incident, you will be part of a coordinated effort under an Incident Management System, or IMS.
Sound, nobody smelled in the room.
An incident command structure is crucial in hazmat emergencies for several reasons. It establishes common terminology, uses a modular organization style to adapt to the needs of the incident. It creates integrated communications between responders from many agencies, establishes centralized command, consolidates your action plans, creates a manageable span of control, pre-designates incident facilities, and establishes comprehensive response management. Within the IMS, there are also 5 functional areas. Command, which is responsible for the overall management of the emergency. Operations, which directs the efforts to mitigate hazards. Planning, which collects data and tactical information. Logistics, which is responsible for all support operations, including medical units. And Finance, that documents personnel hours and contracts. As a first responder at the operations level, your role will most likely be under the modular incident command structure. At the top of the modular command structure are the incident commander and incident safety officer. Under the incident commander is the operations section chief, who is responsible for all mitigation activities. The hazmat group supervisor implements the action plan and directs the overall activities of responders. The hazmat group supervisor will also work with the hazmat safety officer to make sure all practices being used are within departmental guidelines. The Hazmat Group Supervisor will also use the help of the Hazmat Reference Officer to gather data about the products on scene. Under the leadership of the Hazmat Group Supervisor is the Entry Team Leader, Decontamination Leader, and Site Access Control Leader. Each leader guides a select number of team members in their roles to complete each task. The Incident Commander is also responsible for oversight of a logistics officer who coordinates all support operations and the medical unit.
We got 2 people down in the compressor room on the west side of the structure. We're going to do up a map, but we need to get some guys into medical monitoring. Just get them set up to start doing that.
Depending on your level of certification and the dynamics of the incident, you will be plugged into an incident management system to streamline the resources necessary to mitigate dangers. Some departments use an acronym to describe their general goals when dealing with hazmat incidents. An example of this is the DECIDE model. DECIDE is an acronym for Detect the presence of hazardous materials, estimate the likely harm, choose a response objective, identify the action, do the best you can, and evaluate your progress. If your unit is the first to arrive on scene, you may also need to assist in locating a command post. Look for a place that is upwind or uphill from the hazard, as well as a place that is far away from noise and the commotion of the response.
The actual area is going to be hot, the building's going to be warm, and then this will be cold.
NFPA 472 requires that you be ready to be part of an IMS and help locate a command post. Understanding the responsibilities and restrictions of your response as it relates to your department's IMS is a crucial part of dealing with a hazmat incident. In this program, you have learned about establishing scene control, determining control zones, protective actions, locating decontamination areas, emergency decontamination techniques, the safety briefing, and the incident management system. Every hazmat incident is unique, but the role of the first responder is strictly defined by NFPA 472 and an IMS customized for your department. In order to carry out your plan, you need to understand the elements of your response and to effectively support the operation. Knowing your role and limitations not only ensures your safety, but the safety of the public you serve.